Hello everyone. Get my t-shirt in. It's Mike Levin. March 1st, 2018, Thursday, around 6 p.m. About to walk through Madison Square Park, and then I'll hit Union Square. Not sure if the video will make it that long, but I found the cure to my agonizing commute. Agonizing in the sense that it's hurry up and wait several times each direction, twice a day. And it just sucks the energy out of me. It's like a cattle chute. But it's not the worst thing in the world. I am definitely taking in the scenery and the lighting that has been around me in these whole 10 plus years I've been in New York City, but because the commute is like the definition of the daily grind, and it gets you into certain patterns, and you go from certain doors to other doors, and really you lose out on everything that's around you in the transitions. And now I am on Staten Island when I take the ferry. So first consolation prize right there, let there be no mistake. Seeing the Statue of Liberty in unlimited different lighting every evening pass by you is just pretty spectacular, heady stuff. And as a transplanted Philadelphian who's had New York envy all my life, I'm in New York City. And that's a nice reminder. And it used to be, I was joking with Rachel that the worst thing about the skyline of New York City from New Jersey is the knowledge that you're not in New York City. Well, guess what? When you're in Staten Island, are those lights on or off? Some sort of artwork back there. When you're in Staten Island, you see the New York skyline and you're still in New York City. And so that's very nice. So I like raising Addie with this mentality that, she's always home, as long as she's in any one of the 5 boroughs. And I met a guy yesterday who, ended up living in all 5 boroughs and ended up living in Staten Island without the car for the first time. The borough without the car for him is Staten Island. He's sort of reversed roles with his wife, so he's the caregiver, and on the times he does need to transport the kids and stuff, it's always an adventure when they get to take the public transportation system, which, as being part of New York City, reaches out to Staten Island, which is really pretty cool. There's a lot of getting around adventures to be had. But anyway, the weather's getting beautiful, so the camera comes out again. I like YouTube. There's all these different channels I could be doing my thing on, and I'm doing a lot more on Twitter recently. I really am starting to like Twitter now that it's 280 characters. I can never really complete a thought, not that I do here on YouTube anyway, but it gets chopped up into these almost paragraph-sized bits, which is good because prior to 280 characters, 140 characters was not even a paragraph. It was barely a coherent thought. So that magical art and science of information compression, especially while inserting humor and double meaning, I can do that. I could live in Twitter 140 if I really had to, but I find that draining. This is idea capture. This is getting in the flow. And I could never be in Twitter and be in the flow. As a channel, Twitter was a anti-zone media or medium for me. Not anymore. 280 characters. I live in Twitter space. I am a member of the Twitter sphere. So look for me on twitter.com/MickLevin, MiKLevin. Anyway, that was, I guess, as my buddy Adam Edwards, who's getting married. I really have to respond to that wedding invite and decide whether I'm going to travel up to, I think it's Vancouver for this thing. But maybe, wow. So Adam has been the biggest catalyst on my life, bar none, as far as, ending up in New York, opening the door. The weather's nice over here. Come on over. Let's see. Yeah, so the different channels and expressing yourselves out over the Twitter sphere and the YouTube. So As a search engine optimizer and SEO, I am only really doing right by myself, being able to talk to clients with integrity, clients when I'm in the agency world, and my employers when I'm in the in-house world, which I am blessed enough to be right now, with integrity, if you have also walked the walk. So you have to walk the walk to talk the talk, and this always is a problem in, gainful employmentship, non-compete, non-disclosure, blah, blah, blah. But you can't be a player in the online marketing game, win the marketing game. Come on, it's all online now. Well, there's environmentally based. I worked for Scala for 8 years, and I know about digital signage. Anyway, it's all digital online. It's electronic. It's, infused with dynamic light as opposed to static. Instead of, dynamic reflective light squirt onto dead tree carcass with ink. It's got its advantages. I bought the Introduction to Statistical Learning as a old-fashioned paper book, not carrying it with me. I'm going to have to start. It's like the olden days of carrying a book with me wherever I go. I gave that up as soon as I could read decently off even just the little iPhone screens before smartphones got big. I was an instant adopter of books in electronic media because you can have them on you when you need them. Even right now, I might like to read it, so I bought it twice. I actually spent the money to buy that one. Not all books, but that one twice. In Kindle format, which I'll be able to read here on my Note 8, my real mobile phone love, because it is an artist's tablet. It's got that stylus that comes out. And combined with how Google Keep is working these days for notes, let me tell you, if you are not using Google Keep for scribbled down notes cross-platform, you're missing something. They just got the first people to get, really usable cross-platform structured graphics at scale on the cloud, Google. People might debate that, but try Google Keep. They got notes in structured graphics format down really right. I mean, I can do that in the software that comes with the Note 8 specific for the S Pen. And it's got some neat features, I got to admit. Because they're the manufacturer, they can do some neat stuff, but they miss some basics. Using the button for erase, where's that? Come on, that button brings up the user interface for switching between apps. There's like a zillion ways to switch between apps in Android already. We don't need one more using the most valuable button on the S Pen. Use it for a drawing feature. Erase, draw, erase, draw, erase. I have yet to see anything except for the Microsoft Surface Pencil flip over and use the back for erasing. I mean, I gotta tell you, what a natural, perfect idea, what a perfect user interface abstraction. And it's Microsoft. The industry left it to Microsoft. And they've got the most appealing laptops out there these days too, let me tell you. This Microsoft Surface Book Pro 2, I think I got that right, with that weird scaly hinge that just sort of bends open and bends shut, and you can turn around backwards because of that hinge to switch it between a laptop and I don't know, I guess I kind of think of it as an accordion tablet because you got keys on the back and you can play it like an accordion. It's a strange feeling for a tablet to have keys on the back facing out, but I think all these laptops that transform by a full degree of motion hinge have that same issue, because what are you going to do? Morph the keys back into a flat surface? No, you got keys on the back, and software now has to take care of turning them off and making them insensitive to key presses. And they're expensive, by the way. A laptop like that from Microsoft is still top of the line. I think their merely 13 or 15-inch model is like $2,500. I mean, if you're still into spending, a couple of grand for a laptop, Microsoft has you covered with one where the pen can flip backwards and do an erase. And they got the stylus, right? So Microsoft got laptop styluses and touchscreens, mind you, correct, in the way that Samsung got the stylus correct with the S Pen on the Note. Now, I readily admit each of them have their own little issues. There's nowhere to put the S Pen. No, there's nowhere to put the Microsoft Pencil when you're carrying it around. It magnets onto the side, but come on, that magnet is not really that strong. By the way, walking-wise, I'm at about 18th Street, getting me back into another one of the neighborhoods I used to work in and really live in. I'm at 18th and Broadway, very close to my first apartment on 16th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. For my first few years when I worked at Connors Communications and wrote HitTail, an SEO keyword writing suggestion tool that's still going strong. Survived not provided, the secure search not provided incident, which hit a lot of people pretty hard and was the basis of how HitTail worked back in the day. And I consulted to the Rob Walling, the then micropreneur owner. He has since sold it to yet another owner. It has served its purpose in Rob's life. He's moved on to focusing on the type of installment marketing that his second acquisition, Drip, is it drip.com? But the Drip email campaign management software type of suite of product. SEO is a volatile, dynamic ocean. I was drawn to it for whatever reasons. By the way, here I am in Union Square now. All three of my kitties, I'm going through quite a difficult time with one of my cats. He came from here. Billy and Sammy, the brothers, who maybe you'll see in videos. I'll shoot them a little more, especially when Sammy's back at home. Oh my God, you have no idea the emotional time I'm going through right now with a cat that I've had for 12 years. And his brother, and ending up in the hospital over overweight diabetes conditions, which were my own fault, which adds to a rich tapestry of history with cats that I have. I will not go into it because I would not be able to get through it, even saying their names. Wow. So, I'm doing pretty good. 12 years old. I could have probably got him into the hospital. I could have gotten him into the hospital sooner for symptoms having to do with diabetes. And on that front, I'm a dumbass. But Sammy, the cat who survived jumping out of a two-story window for the rats in the back lot while we lived on the other side of Broadway and on Vermelia Street in Inwood. Man, this cat jumped out of a two-story window, was missing for a whole day, and then going out calling for him. He answers, and reunification. And there are various other stories involving this cat, let me tell you. Someday maybe Addie will tell you those stories on her channel, because the cat had a large part of raising Addie, my child. So let's see. Yeah. So, and then we got Charlie there too. It's back there a ways, but the PetSmart. Our third cat came from there as well, Charlie cat, and lots of stories, man. Addie is growing up in an environment where it's like National Geographic every day, where you got Billy and Sammy, almost like a yin and yang brother pair, with Billy being a living teddy bear cat and Sammy being large and in charge, full alpha. Would have been a classic tomcat were he not gone. The neutered, or I guess it's neutered is the decent way to call it on YouTube, indoor cat process, which happened before I even got him, so it wasn't even my decision. I adopted him that way from Catkind, and God bless that organization. They save a lot of cats, but they cut off a lot of genetic lineage lines. So Addie and I do joke not unfrequently about preserving the DNA of some of these cats, all of the cats. Put them in vials for cloning. And who do I have this in my background? Welcome to Union Square. Let's see if I can get that guy.
That started around evidence that's being hidden in plain sight.
Yeah?
As the book of the Bible was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek.
Yeah. Good stuff, good stuff. It was written.
Kept the Bible outside of the native language of the people.
Yeah, that's true, outside the native language. But even in, in Judaism, when the Bible is outside the native language of the people, you know what the Jews do? They learn the language that it's written in. They make it their national language again. Claim back their country. Wow. I feel a strong sense of tribal allegiance with people who can be knocked flat on their ass over and over and get up and be stronger each time. I mean, I feel a lot of those things, as I walk here on a Union Square. I feel, connection to the land for maybe the first time. Philadelphia wasn't bad, but, I don't think I'd ever be doing this in Philadelphia. There's a strong, entanglement, interconnection that comes only after a long time. It didn't feel that way naturally at first, let me tell you. So one of the interesting things about walking in New York City is these bubbles of space around you. You never collide with people, and every once in a while you see me have to take some sort of defensive maneuver, and I'm holding my camera up, and it's clearly I'm shooting myself, but you do occasionally, run into people who are, in one of two categories. It's like when there's a conflict, when you really lock horns, and I'm gonna just walk past this, I'm on a roll, see how far I can get. The stops are over and over. But when you really lock horns with someone and the rational reasons for the locking horns is not enough to explain the hostility, you just found yourself someone whose API with the world is antithetically different than yours, opposite. Can't exist together at once. And I find often that yin and yang counterbalance each other. Everyone generates and consumes their energies in different ways. Maternal, instinctive energies of yin, or the dynamic, hunting energies of yang. And I got to be careful with that word dynamic, because very often the change, because that's what dynamic is. Dynamic means change, is not really attributable to either the yin or the yang side, because they each settle into their patterns and their daily ruts, their routines. Yin, the nurturers, are, raising the children, educating the people, and making sure that society generally is stable. Whereas the yangs go out and hunt and feed them all and fuel the fire. And, it leads to a oversimplification where, they say the male hunters are the disposable ones, and the women are the resources for reproduction. But that's just total oversimplification. And, we're seeing today that, it is a spectrum, and there is a separation between hardware and software. Software can be loaded into the system that was intended for different hardware. I think that is entirely clear. And it's only a limitation of technology that you can't throw a switch to get the hardware back in alignment with the software. Because I'm going to tell you, there's some sort of split here. Hardware is cheap. Hardware is reproducible. Hardware is exactly copyable. Sure, some copy mistakes get introduced, and that's like the basis of evolution, but in today's digital world, copy mistakes don't have to be introduced. So we have, hardware which is increasingly diminished in value as they can be virtualized under different substrates, or whatever you want to call it. And the unique instances, the software, that value skyrockets, because you can't always even record the state of software. On PCs these days, you can snapshot, and anyone running stuff like VMware Fusion or any of the virtualization software out there know that you can just typically take snapshots of a system state, and you can roll back, go forward, a lot like backing up a drive. And that's all pretty brilliant, but that requires your system being virtualized and another system being assigned as the parent system. Does the parent system have that same feature? It all becomes very silly and circular, and you always come back to the conclusion that there's a very important, unique instance of software running somewhere that is not at this moment copied and saved into a persistent media. If the power was lost, that running copy was lost. You might have the last backup. This concept is reoccurring everywhere. Nature, technology, local caches are always at risk because local caches have not been thrown out to some sort of global context that has some management, or I say to a global context. I'm not talking about global variables. I'm talking about, sending something out of your own local scope into the local scope of something else who has the job of warehousing, storing that data, making that state accessible again in the future. Regaining state, that's a really big thing. I keep a personal journal about, I don't know how many years ago, but I've been keeping a journal since 1988 in some form or another, and I don't read back over it much, but I do when I have to regain state to a point where I thought was good, and I want to get back to that place in my head. Is that not Git? So I've been beating around the bush on almost all my media channels with Git. I talk a lot about Linux and Python and Vim because they're easy discussions. They're, almost static products, right? The Python interpreter is a fixed thing. You could read the C code on it and just understand how it will interpret something always, forever, that same way. But the code you can write for the Python interpreter is a lot more liquid and flowing and dynamic. And it's easy to capture state. It's digital software these days. It's Git, solve problem. And when you start doing that, and you fork a couple of times, you roll back a couple of times, and you start taking advantage of what it really means to have the 100% commit by commit, undo, edit by edit history of your code all the way back to the beginning, you understand DNA a little bit more. Maybe understand a little bit more than DNA if DNA is a larger fractal reflection of something going on down at an even smaller level. Sequencing is important. You got random. Put a bunch of random stuff together. Eventually, two things will link up that can carry out the machine instruction called copy. And it'll be a negative image of what you copy just based on the nature of molecules and atoms and stuff. But the copy after that will be like the original, maybe with some copy mistakes inserted in. But random leads to many sequences. Certain sequences lead to replication. Replication leads to growing patterns, self-replicating patterns, proto-life, not really life at this point, but at some point, consciousness sets in. And, what is consciousness? Is human thought the only good, preservable, what we should be imaging and building our AIs into? Or what about worm intelligence and flea intelligence and bacteria consciousness, intelligence? Everything has some sort of sense of continuation of self, something circular, some little bit of, dare I say self-awareness. And that's going to be the big question. That's going to be what determines the next stage of the evolution of physics. How information that can escape scientific method. So pure information, totally outside the scientific method. If there's random, then certain things are going to be non-reproducible, and you cannot use the purest interpretations of the scientific method. But that's okay, because it's just one of the maths. It's all math. It's all just symbolic thought and reasoning. And depending on which wonderlands you want to believe in, you choose your maths. And I recently have been indoctrinated into the maths of loop quantum gravity, LQG. And it's just an alternative to superstring theories and M-branes. And it's just a different way of looking at things. It talks about time and space having a smallest space-time nodule, a little nugget, which is kind of like its own little universe. And these things link up and create larger space-time with its own local, universe as they link up. It grows bigger and bigger. Could explain a lot of things. One particle of light fits in one of these nodes. A lot of good things about this, but I got to go back to superstrings because, I can't argue quantum loop gravity without refreshing myself on strings. And I've read a bunch of that other stuff, so I'm going to be doing on Audible now. I know Audible, but certain things, certain times, certain ways of listening to things, you can absorb it as if you read. I do a lot of rewinding to make sure I get that point. I wouldn't do audibles if I didn't have control over stop and rewind. And, by the time I get something into my head, it's the same exact process I would have done if I were reading, going back and rereading the page and rereading the page. So on Audible, I am now listening to The Elegant. I think it's called The Elegant Universe, and it's just one of the recommended ones under the Audible recommendation system based on the ones I've listened to lately that have very much affected my Twitter stream. If you want to get tuned into my Green Lantern spirituality, then go check out my Twitter feed because I'm talking all about it there. And I pull back and I do it a little differently on different channels because of the audiences that I think are out there. And I think a lot of people are waiting for me to make my move on Python. And in the best voice of the Chamberlain from the Dark Crystal, it's time to make my move. So, Pipulate 2.0, 3.0, whatever, latest version of Pipulate, based on the discovery that Python Pandas is Pipulate. And the only challenges left was getting it in and out of Google spreadsheets. Fast, easy, in a clear mental model so that even people who are new to this stuff can take up programming and create their own dashboards in Google Sheets. That's what I do for work. I'm going to sprinkle out little bits of that into the free and open source community in GitHub, github.com/Miklevin, MIKLEVIN/Pipulate, PIPULATE, like populate, but with an I. And it's very much in the spirit of things like the Flask web micro framework for Python, one of the most popular web frameworks on Python, and it's a micro framework. It almost doesn't do anything for you. It connects the dots between a few pre-existing public domain libraries, public domain, I'm still talking like it's the 90s, through a few open source libraries called Workzoid, which takes care of the router, the decorator routing of serving particular functions based on URL calls. Really brilliant stuff. And Response, Kenneth Reich's, almost should be part of the library, but that would kill it, the standard core library, but that's where code goes to die. Response or requests object, request package. I'll get the language right eventually. What makes it worse, there is a lot of language for it in Python. These things are packages, they are libraries, they are modules, they are all three. But they're things you generally pull from the Python packaging index, or PyPI, sometimes called PyPI, but spelled PyPI. PyPI is usually the main place people go because it makes the install really easy. You don't need to deal with GitHub, Git cloning and stuff. You don't even need Git. You just open a shell, a command line interface. You go pip install Pipulate, and bam, Pipulate's on your system. But you better not do that unless it's a system that you've already installed Anaconda on, because I actually leave out a lot of requirements for Pipulate in its install because I know they're covered by Anaconda, and Pipulate is either intended to be used by people who are using Anaconda or to be installed on servers by people who know how to install the types of dependencies I'm talking about, which is NumPy for Pandas and Pandas itself. By the way, I'm near Washington Square Park, which decides for me how I'm going to go home the rest of the way. I've had enough walking. I'll be wrapping up the video. There's an entrance to the one that way, and I shall take about 2 long blocks. So that'll give me a chance to wrap up this video, give you an idea of how much longer it'll go. It's been a while since I've done one of these like 30-minute videos, and I've got so much to talk about, oh my god. But follow along now on multiple channels because the action is being spread out over my Twitter feed, over this YouTube channel, over my location in GitHub. Those are the 3 main ones. I'm considering a 4th, maybe Tumblr, for just, larger than 280 characters. Maybe, I'm not sure. But one project that's coming up for sure is data transforms of my Twitter feed, taking all this idea capture of this, Green Lantern creation myth stuff and querying my Twitter feed once to apply edits. So I'm going to have a mapped list of edits, because you can't edit the already posted tweet. That's set in stone in the way things work. So you have some sort of mapping from existing tweets, the edits you want to make, and now you can query an intermediary level that you write an API for to organize. So one transform to apply edits, another transform to do hierarchical organizations, group things into pages and chapters and paragraphs or whatever. Probably not pages, because pagination should be automatic these days. So, chapters and paragraphs is all we're talking about. And then you got a book, and then various other transforms will turn it into EPUBs or PDFs or whatever have you, using whatever library, Python library is best for doing that. And I'll make countless free and open source versions of my Alice in Wonderland book. Oh man, this walk is the gift that keeps on giving. I'm so glad the camera's holding out for all this. And iPhone is my walking, vlogging platform still. I don't think I could have got through this on Android. Even just the default resolution of that friggin' Note 8 would have run that thing out of space. But no problem on my iPhone. It's not like I have that much space here. So anyway, iOS versus Android, video of the future, because I got very strong opinions about how Apple totally screwed up. Like no one has any idea of the, sudden liquefaction that's gonna happen underneath a certain area. And it's all about price breakpoints. It's just like Macs versus PCs from yesteryear. There's a certain level of quality that once it's delivered, virtually for free at commodity pricing, no one's gonna choose their old. They're gonna keep some old versions of their old stuff around to access their media libraries that have trapped them in over the years. And it's gonna cause very bad feelings, and I think I am the canary in the coal mine, because it took me a long time to become an Apple fan. Let me tell you, they were the enemy. I was a Commodore fan. It took me a long time to become a Commodore fan because I hated the C64. I liked the Amiga. Turns out I'm an Atari fan. I'm a fan of the Atari hardware engineers, specifically Jay Miner, but a lot of software people in the mix that still should be called out and mentioned because they're still around and should be continuously thanked, including the illustrious R.J. Michael, who, if I have it correct, did the intuition part of the software, the windowing stuff. Sorry I wasn't a big fan of Workbench. I was a CLI guy, but I just want to point out how the Amiga team was one of those electrical, magical combinations of people who created one of those electrical, magical pieces of hardware that made you have the illusion that hardware was important again, and that hardware was an important part of the equation. It's not. All hardware gets virtualized until you get down to base reality again. So Don't fall in love with your hardware, but take advantage of the latest stuff that you can afford, because good APIs today are super, super valuable. It's actually a source of advantage, dropping some money into some proprietary stuff so that you can do more today that won't be reaching the free and open source idea theft community until tomorrow. Clever thievery. I mean, I'm not being very accusational. Everyone does it. I do the same thing. You look at how something's working and you reverse it, or you try and do better, you pivot. If you can pivot and have 100% genuinely new thought, that's a magical thing. Then you're even more, legit than the clever thieves who are in the game with you. So read Robert Cialdini, or Cialdini, I learned the pronunciation is from my good friend John Morabito, who has really been schooling me in how much I need to keep on top of to keep in stride with the youngins, right? So old guy, never lost touch that much, here and there maybe. Keenly aware of the need to sharpen the saw. Reducing the need to sharpen the saw, Linux, Python, Vim, and Git. And that brings it circular. Gee, I get to bring it circular before I hop on the one. Git is it. You don't have to know Git inside and out. You gotta have an edit by edit undo history of your code from the beginning of the project to now. And you need certain abilities to share that and to send links around and to give others the conditional ability to have that same edit by edit history. Now all this forking stuff, oh, it's beautiful. I'm going to get this Statue of Liberty in the background here. All this forking stuff and all, well, it is nice, but you don't have to really, be a Git master to get the benefit of Git. But when you stop to contemplate what it's doing in the equation, and by the way, I'm just scanning for the subway entrance. Aha, that's the direction I want to go. Read the Dune series beginning to end, from Frank Herbert to the ghost-written stuff by his son and that other sci-fi collaborator. Good stuff. The Kwisatz Haderach, if I'm getting the word right, isn't who you think. It's not Paul Atreides, Dune Messiah, it's someone else. And the reason it's this someone else is the insight into Git and why it's so important. And so, yay, Frank Herbert, if you're the one who outlined that in your notes and your son just carried out the writing. And he's very undercredited, just like the whole Wizard of Oz book series. Past the first couple is undercredited too. It's great stuff. Totally should be read and read again. You know who you should learn about? Shaggy Man. I think he's the second book. He's like an early character. And, he gives a character that a certain type of people in society can relate to. And it's right there, side by side with Tick-Tock, the Mechanical Man. Not the Tin Man at all, not Nick Chopper, but another man you have to wind up one way to make him think, wind up another way to make him walk. Don't believe when you hear certain things put down by other people. A put down is a deliberate attempt to keep you from consuming that same thing for yourself and making a judgment call for yourself. So read all the Wizard of Oz books, read all the Dune books, and, get the lesson of Git from the Dune books with a punchline at the end, which I won't spoil for you. But yeah, technology is rapidly on the way to one of the various scenarios of sci-fi futures. Very early on, we're not even a Type 1 in the galactic civilization scale. Type 1 can harness all the energy from their sun. We're not at free energy yet, but that might get us there. But so far, so good, in a very optimistic way, in a way that you don't hear represented very much in the media today. And shame on everyone for being so pessimistic about everything. We've seen worse before, and we've pulled through it all before. I think perhaps we're working towards a future where superheroes become real, and they will be our leaders like Donald Trump, who go into gladiatorial battles to the death in order to settle wars in a way that everyone will entertain and will serve all the egos involved, and, you know, bring world peace and some really good entertainment to boot. I think we're on that path, and I could really dig that. I'd tune in, I'd support that, you know, with my watching the advertisements if it got rid of wars. And so, you know, let's all work towards that. Let's petition for that. Let's stop, you know, highlighting the problems, and let's start highlighting the solutions. We don't need aliens to help us stack limestone bricks razor thin in alignment with the poles of the earth. I think we were actually quite capable of doing that for ourselves, and we're quite capable of a lot more. So 40 minutes, I better wrap up before the 45-minute Google YouTube limit hits. So thanks for joining me, and if you haven't subscribed so far, now's a good time, and hit thumbs up for a like, and see you real soon.